There were a lot of units I was really excited to try out when Warhammer 3 first launched. Many of them ended up being as awesome as I'd hoped they'd be, but inevitably, there were those that failed to make any noise in campaign or multiplayer whatsoever, and they kind of just fizzled out and have been forgotten about for the moment. Plague Drones are that unit for me, arguably the most disappointing unit in the Realms of Chaos. Not the worst, but the most disappointing. I had lofty expectations for them, and they certainly did not fulfill those. We'll go in depth with all their issues and how I'd fix them, perhaps in another dedicated video, but for this one, we're using Loopy's Battle Balance mod again. They've been buffed here, so I want to try them out. Plus 14 charge bonus, 20% extra weapon strength, and 500 more mass than vanilla helps at least some of their issues, but they're up against Khorne and a skilled opponent in ODM Green One, so it won't be an easy task. We've traveled deep into the realm of the Blood God to continue the deadly cycle of the great game, and for my build, just wanted to make Plague Drones work, because they're just so cool. Fortunately, they have blessed me with Nurgle's Rot once again, so we'll see how well my voice holds up for this one. I'm using 2 of the 1500 gold Death's Head variant, supported by a Herald on a Rotfly. That means biological grenades will be top priority, especially against Khorne. They will not win melee engagement straight up. They will take crazy damage even against like Fleshhounds, so you gotta babysit them pretty hard and commit to that skirmish phase. Locus of Virulence will improve their melee damage output. Fecundity and Fleshy Abundance will heal them. Stream of Corruption to thin out the infantry hordes, and Death's Heads will rain down upon the scariest monsters on the other side of the field. 4 Marauders in front, supported by 3 Plague Toads, a unit of Chaos Warriors with great weapons, rocking that sleek-looking Rhino Horn aesthetic and poopy-flavored weapons, and Bilious Thunderguff, the big Chungus in charge, the one that will hopefully anchor the battle line and trade blows with that Soulgrinder and Exalted Bloodthirster. Can also expel Violent Wind from his derriere to corrode enemy armor and deal damage, so big fart plays incoming. On the flip side, Blood God's armies are defending their own home turf. Soulgrinders of Khorne can direct their fire in this mod. That Harvester Cannon is no longer treated as a precursor weapon, so a bit more utility from the Forge Bound. And the Skull Cannon, well, it might just be exactly what the Doctor ordered when it comes to trading missile fire with Plague Drones. Khorne doesn't have a ton of options on that front, but with 2 artillery pieces, they might be able to sit back and shoot a bit, swat some flies from the skies. Also, very important for me to note here, Scarbrand and Exalted Bloodthirsters both get Gore Feast now, which means they regen while in melee. That is a pretty significant buff for both of them, because Khorne normally doesn't have access to much healing, and it means in those SDM fights, they can get worn down pretty bad, while Nurgle can bounce back with all those crazy regen sources. So, we'll see if that Gore Feast plays a role here. Khorne's almost playing this Shogun 2 style on Sakura Ridge. They rushed immediately to the hilltop, so Nurgle will have to back up and concede that positional advantage for now, but they've got plenty of time to do a little bit of skirmishing with those Death's Heads. Now, they will have to pretty much just face tank the Soulgrinder and the Skull Cannon. They don't have too many options on that front. They do not fire their ammo particularly quickly, so they need time, which means time spent dancing with the Bloodthirster and time getting blown out of the sky by artillery. That's okay, they can be healed. The Soulgrinder cannot, so in a normal situation, maybe you try shooting some at the Bloodthirster too. Maybe start whittling him down, because you know you're going to have to kill him at some point, and he is going to be a problem. But with Gore Feast, he would regen all that, so chunking the Soulgrinder, focusing that down, is probably the right call. That or the Skull Cannon, those are the 2 SDMs that the Plague Drones can actually deal with for now. And the Bloodthirster still does have to be careful, because a Rotfly with a Herald to top it, and 2 full units of Plague Drones, the full surround off, and Locus of Virulence going off, plus 24 melee attack, plus 25% extra weapon strength, they could mess up a Bloodthirster pretty bad. They can't take that melee engagement right now, though, because the cannons will be firing in, and if you get a full surround off, you basically expose yourself to collateral damage where the cannon shots would go through 3, 4, 5 models at a time, and you're not going to have a good time in that situation. So a Fleshy Abundance tossed their way to get them healed up. Not sure if that will bring any models back. Usually it's going to focus more just on healing the unit as a whole. But they've still done a decent amount of damage to the Soulgrinder, and of course that Soulgrinder will not be regenerating any health this game. It has no sources of healing, unlike the Gore Feast Bloodthirster. So it's about down to 2/3 HP. The Fleshy Abundance has been tossed away with the Plague Drones. That's a relatively expensive spell in terms of wins and magic costs, so not ideal. And they have lost some models to the Skull Cannon, which is doing a lot of damage here. I've actually been pretty impressed with that so far. Normally not considered a tool of expert precision, but this game it has probably killed 4 or 5 Plague Drones, and continuing to whittle them down alongside that Soulgrinder. And Khorne is looking to get into melee. Go figure, it's kind of what they're known for. And of course, there will be some nice little baits here, because all of us playing this game right now are just some of the best players in the entire world. Marauders backing up. They don't really want to go in. They're going to bait in some of the Plague Toads, who then go after the Forsaken. And with 2 of those on top of a Marauder piling in, Forsaken in the center should crumble pretty quick. But of course, Khorne has some tools for countering that, and a lot of it revolves around that Bloodthirster. Wherever he lands, Nurgle's melee force is going to have some issues. Bilious Thunderguff can beat his ass, but he is slow. He does not have the mobility, the flying, the ability to reposition, and that means the Bloodthirster, wherever he lands, well, it's going to get volcanic, let's just say that. Plague Drones are doing what they can to support with the Death's Heads, and they can get some good shots in from above, but we're going to see that center crumble pretty much immediately for Nurgle as soon as those Plague Toads pull out, because they realize with the Minotaurs with great weapons there and the Bloodthirster, not a whole lot to be done on that front. And Nurgle is kind of taking a slight uphill engagement, so they will take some debuffs in these situations as well. See how fast the Marauders crumbled there, but not really a big deal. Just toss a Fecundity their way, get some healing in the center, and things should be fine as long as Nurgle does not overcommit and continues to focus more on the skirmish phase with those Death's Heads up top. They have done a lot of damage. Sometimes they throw stupidly into routing Marauders and Forsaken. Not ideal. Probably want to turn off Fire at Will, because you do want to make sure every single one of those volleys is hitting something important. Not good versus infantry, which is one of the changes that kind of surprised me in Warhammer 3. I always thought Death's Heads would be more like an actual grenade. They'd be more like wave clear, kind of like Poison Wind Globadiers. Instead, they're more like javelins. They're more like focused on killing single entities, and they are good in that role. It's very expensive. Harold made a very wise business decision to pull away from the Soulgrinder. He could have probably taken that fight, except the Minotaurs were coming in from behind, and that would have made things pretty ugly pretty fast, and this is where that Nurgle healing is really going to start kicking in. Locus of Fecundity, Fecundity from the army abilities, and Fleshy Abundance, all 3 of those together. Anytime you see a Nurgle unit dropping low, you know they're going to be able to get back in the fight, and Bilious Thunderguff dropping that violent, wheezing fart in the middle of everything, and Forsaken are about to start rounding off, and looks like Nurgle's looking a bit overwhelmed in the center, but that Giant is full HP, so it's probably a bit misleading there. The infantry, of course, when they're trading with each other, the only infantry that's going to do even remotely decent here are those Chaos Warriors with great weapons, and they're actually going to do great, because it's only Forsaken, really, they have to worry about, and honestly, Skull Cannons aren't amazing in CQB, as satisfying as those burnouts and biker tricks look. Nurgle Chaos Warriors barely get scratched by Forsaken, and they'll be able to cut through them quite efficiently. Big time Fleshy Abundance Overcast about to be set up in the center. Will hit most of the Plague Father's most cherished children. Downside, of course, being Khorne has some built-in counters, because any unit that's set on fire loses some of that healing effectiveness, and the Blood God has a lot of flame to play with, but big plays incoming. Bloodthirster is overextended and overstaying his welcome in the skies, and the Goon Squad cometh. Plague Drones buzzing in with a full surround, which will force the Exalted to ground, where Bilious Thunderguff is watching, waiting, commiserating. And this is exactly the situation Nurgle's game planning for. Take the Bloodthirster's mobility away, hit him with Curse of the Slug, and poison him so he can't escape, then have the Chaos Giant beat his butt like a conga drum. Now, I was surprised to see the Bloodthirster push his way out of the situation so easily. Was expecting to get a full surround off there with the Plague Drones, and I did not think he'd be able to push out like that, slowed down by both Poison and Curse of the Slug, and having a Giant beat on him, but still, he did take a lot of damage. Gore Feast will allow him to regen some of this, but of course, Bilious is doing his own thing at the moment, making bacon pancakes out of Marauder infantry. That's probably a pretty quick way to go, but I'm not sure it's super pleasant, especially a Nurgle Giant. I imagine Bilious, even before he drops the big farts, probably smells pretty terrible. Skull Cannon has continued to fire all game long, and it has harried and harassed those poor Plague Drones. One of those units has been really sad and been down models pretty much the entire game because of it, but the Fleshy Abundances and the Locus of Fecundity heals have kept them in the fight, and they are still ready to go. They're actually back to about half HP. Both units are gonna be pretty decent in late game in terms of a melee situation, because Locust of Virulence to give them extra AP and melee attack. Well, first, before they go after the Bloodthirster, which would probably... I'm torn here. I feel like maybe I should have gone for the Lord right then and there, but the Fleshhounds are such a problem, and if you go after the Bloodthirster and get rear charged by them, your Plague Drones are going to be super sad. They only have 40 armor, so maybe it was the right call to focus on the Fleshhounds first. They're such a powerful unit for such a cheap price. Khorne's best unit, bar none. Like, absolutely insane. Value City every single time. They don't even have to do anything. They just always get it in terms of getting their value back. But yeah, Death's Heads continue to pour in. They took a lot of damage in that fight against the Fleshhounds, who have 65 weapon strength. Yeah, it's definitely painful every single time that happens. But they're going to go after the Soulgrinder here, who's at pretty much exactly half HP with a full surround. And if that Herald's able to come in, perhaps they could kill this thing off. Another heal going their way. Fecundity this time, the army ability for Nurgle. And Bilious in the center taking on the Bloodthirster, who would have probably gotten pretty close to crumbling at this point if not for Gore Feast. Really important SEM duel here. It might decide the course of the battle. If the Exalted Demon drops pretty soon, it could kind of force a cascade routing effect for Khorne, because they won't have any leadership aura in the center. I don't believe the Skull Cannon provides one, unless it's got a Herald to top it, or rather a Blood Reaper. But very important for me to note from that fight, while Bilious Thundergod fights the Minotaurs with great weapons and the Exalted Bloodthirster comes back in, a Fleshy Abundance was sent his way, and a decent chunk of that was nullified because of the flaming damage from the Exalted Bloodthirster. So normally you'd probably see Bilious at least a third HP. Instead, he's more on par with the Exalted Bloodthirster, and this is a really important fight for both sides right here. Bounce Bar is swinging in favor of Khorne, but with a couple swings on the Exalted Bloodthirster, he could crumble out. Gore Feast has kept him in the fight. Bilious is dropping low. That is definitely bad news for Nurgle. If he routs, that's potentially a game, because the Fleshhounds could run him to the edges of the map. 1100 HP, down to 750, and yes, the Exalted Bloodthirster is beginning to crumble, and the Rotfly with the Herald atop it, sending some mucus, some disgusting vomit its way, should be able to finish it off with a rear charge from the Death's Head's Plague Drones coming in from behind. Magma spewing everywhere, crazy eruptions going off, but the Lord will die. At the same time, though, Bilious routed, and that is a huge issue for Nurgle, because they need that SEM, they need its HP, they need its damage to help deal with the Soulgrinder, and as the Fleshhounds pile in, this will pretty much be ended as a contest. Khorne has a little bit too much left on the field. A couple Marauders that were routed off have not been brought back into the fold quite yet, but it would have been irrelevant anyway. The Chungus is getting melodramatic. It's like one of those Shakespearean deaths, like, oh, my body, it is in pain, and he will crumble to his knees. And that will be the end of the battle. Khorne will defend their homeland, and ODM, the green one, will take the field. GG to him. Very well played. So, in this case, I really wanted to try out the Plague Drones, and they have received some nice buffs in Loopy's Battle Balance Overhaul. Neither one of them performed bad this game. In fact, one of them got 1600 damage value, so it actually paid for itself, which is quite good. I'm not overly impressed with them for their cost. I think they need some more love. And they have multiple issues, and as I said, I'll go more further in depth with that. But you basically just have to babysit them like crazy to get decent value out of them. You have to toss a lot of Fleshy Abundances their way. They'll die to like basic archers, they'll die to basic warhounds and stuff when they're getting charged in the rear, and they have a serious issue disengaging once you commit them. And one thing that they really love to do is one model gets caught and then it just pulls the rest of them back in. Even if you like are actively seeing them go back and you're spamming movement orders, they all get sucked back into combat. It's a big issue for them, and it makes it hard to get the damage output that you'd like to see. I feel like they should be flying Monstrous Cap. They should crush things on the charge, and they should be very tanky. And they don't really do either one of those. So while they performed well this game, I think it's hard to justify bringing them. And I really wouldn't make them the core of my army for any other reason than trying to get a cool replay with them. Wouldn't mind if they got some more buffs.